Thank you for tuning in to Teaching for the Culture. This is your host, Bianca Goolsby, and I have my phenomenal co-host, Kimberlyn Jackson, for the Whole Child series. Kimberlyn, how you doing?
I'm doing well today. I don't have any complaints getting used to this quarantine social distancing. Kind of feel like I'm in the zone a little bit. How you doing over there?
So, doing well. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to set up my new office equipment that I've been trying to make myself comfortable since I'm kind of forced to kind of be in this seat longer than what I usually am. But
Hmm.
overall, I'm doing okay. I'm just really trying to work on powering down, like having cycles of powering down, because I'm getting really exhausted watching the news and seeing what's taking place.
Yeah, I definitely have done that for this past week intentionally. Over the course of the past 2 weeks, almost by accident, but have not really watched the news or, I am a news junkie. Like I can really get stuck there, but intentionally just doing things for me. And my life has been pretty peaceful. My spirit hasn't been disturbed. I just feel calm. My sleep is getting better. So even on our last show, we talked about how I wasn't going to sleep really, and then not sleeping long. So I
Mhm.
think my routine is still upset. I'm still not going to sleep until like 3 in the morning, but I'm getting my 8 hours, and that's what matters, right?
Good.
So, yeah, things are kind of levelizing and stabilizing a bit for me. So I'm glad to report that.
That's good. That's good. See, look at that progress. And it's about being intentional. And that was something that you said you was gonna work on. So that's good.
I did. And that's what we were talking about on our last show with our self care plans, making those intentional decisions to do something for self and to do something a little bit better. And what's so interesting, I'll share this before we kind of jump into what we're doing today. I had run across this self care calendar that I was utilizing, right? And it said every day was for the month of April, every day to do a particular self care activity, right? So I did that tough for the first week of April. I was like, ooh, I'm killing it, right? I was challenging other people. I'm posting it on my page every day. Like I was real proud doing the self care things. And then I thought to myself, this is a lot to maintain.
Mm.
I know, like, I think I'm gonna abort the mission. And I just stopped. Like, it was so it's so funny because what it shows is that even when we think we're doing the best thing, like, that was all about self-care, it
Right.
became a lot for me. And I really had to pay attention to what my mind was telling me and what my body was telling me so that I didn't get over consumed with self-care. So self-care for me in that moment was to stop with the pressure of having to do something every day with this calendar and become very intentional about what I actually needed to take care of myself, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, I'm glad that you are very intentional with your goals, and I am happy to report that I have not. I'm working on it. Um,
Uh-huh.
I'm working on it, and I acknowledge that. But it's just so many projects that I have been busting out lately. And listen, I'm sorry. I'm a little guilty there.
But you're an essential worker. And I know that a lot of people need you and they are looking for your services. But I think what we're going to talk about today is really going to help you because there have to be some boundaries in place for you to be able to make sure you're prioritizing self. When you get in the zone, and it happens for all of us, especially in the helping profession. So, you were an educator and now you're an advocate, me being an educator and an educational consultant, we get consumed with wanting to be there for other people, and having the skill set to be able to help them with the things that they need. So we
Mhm.
overextend ourselves and we try to make ourselves available and, just want to be there. I'm working from sun up to sundown and, just really trying to meet the need. But what we find is that at the end of the day, we wind up burning the candle at both ends and we become burnt out. So it
Mhm.
really is, it happens, it's very common, and not necessarily to feel bad about it, but to be aware of it because you have to make intentional decisions to be able to help yourself not be in that situation because it's very easy to find yourself in it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we're talking about it today because Imma be honest, I need help in that department, and
Mhm.
for those of you that are watching, this live, our podcast live, please comment where you're from, comment if you are having issues with boundaries, connect with us so that we can have a conversation about it.
For sure, for sure. So I just did, you know me, I can't do two things at one time. So I just shared it over on my page so that some people can come in. What I can say is boundaries is probably the thing that I talk about most in life. So when I am, whether it's in an educational setting, whether it's when I'm coaching my clients, even when I'm just talking to friends and family, boundaries is
Mhm.
something that comes up. It is relevant in every single aspect of life. And often when I'm talking to people about things like why they feel a certain way, whatever, I'm like, that's a boundary issue. That
Yeah.
is a boundary issue. So yeah, let's kind of jump into today. And as Bianca said, if you all have specific questions or anything, go ahead and drop those in. As my pastor used to say when I was younger, if you can't say amen, say ouch. So that might happen from time to time as you hear yourself talked about and what we're talking about. So the first thing is to just really define what we mean when we say boundaries, so that I'm really big on common definitions of things and common understandings of words. So when we talk about a boundary, we're talking about something that marks a limit, something that defines who is responsible for what. So if we think about, for instance, in a property line, that would determine where your property begins and someone else's property ends, right? Or
Mhm.
when we think about boundaries, it could be a guideline or rule that someone has created personally in order to determine how they want people to interact with them, in order to keep them safe, in order to keep them in a space where they don't have to compromise themselves in a way that could be negative. So that's kind of like just the overall definition of boundaries, but it really is thinking about the limits that you need to place on your interactions with self and others in order to keep yourself in a safe frame of mind, safe physically, safe emotionally, safe on every level of what you have to deal with in life. So that's what we mean when we say boundaries. Now, mostly everything I'm going to talk about is going to come from my favorite book in the whole wide world. It is almost like my life coaching Bible, and it's called Boundaries. Go figure. Boundaries: When to Say Yes, How to Say No, to Take Control of Your Life. And it's by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. So, the backstory on this: so I started therapy in, like, I want to say maybe 2008, 2009. At the time, I was in the middle of a very toxic and abusive relationship. During this time, I wound up getting engaged, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I knew that I wasn't okay. I just didn't know how to fix it. Right. And one of the places that we talked about a lot was church, because he was heavily involved in the church. And I was, because of my association with him, involved in church. And what my therapist said to me is, you have a sign over your head that says if something is wrong, Kimberlyn will fix it. And I
Mhm.
was like, girl, we got to turn that sign off. Like, and she was like, I'm telling you, there is a sign above your head that says Kimberlyn will fix it if something goes wrong. And she recommended that I read this book. And I went out the very same day, got the book, and it changed my life because I really realized what boundaries were, that I had them, and also how I was allowing people to infringe upon my boundaries. It was life changing for me. Like I really yeah, it was a big deal. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and this goes right into what you were discussing. So there are some myths when it comes to boundaries, and we want to kind of debunk those myths and give some people some freedom. So the first myth is, if I set boundaries, I'm being selfish.
Mm.
Right? So, for instance, if we just use your example of, people are calling you and they're like, oh my gosh, Bianca, my website, like I need the help. I got to convert my business, blah, 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 whatever, whatever, da, da, da. And it's slightly outside of the work hours that you set for yourself. You may tell yourself, well, if I don't respond, then I'm being selfish. They need me, they need help.
Yep.
Right. When the fact of the matter is, and we've heard this so many times, every time that we get on an airplane, is that you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you can put it on somebody else. And when you don't do that, it causes you to not honor what's going on in you. So if you think back to last week, when we talked about those self-care plans, remember we talked about the triggers and the
Yeah.
physical responses.
Yep.
Right. So when we talked about those physical responses, what will start to happen, and this is a place where you can identify where you're having boundary issues, because whatever your physical responses to stress are will start to show up at that time.
So I definitely get physically, I get tense. Um,
Uh-huh.
and it's one of those things where I'm like, oh my gosh, like you could feel the jolt in your body. And then also too, I get headaches,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I'm trying to strategically think about so many things at one time. I just can't. I have to step back. So I know that that happens for me all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what your body is saying to you is, Bianca, you're not honoring you right now.
Mhm.
Right. But what we're in the habit of doing is talking ourselves out of that.
Yeah.
So we say, "Oh no, I'm tripping. Like, I'm here for the good of the group, or I'm here for this
Yeah.
person, or what have you." And we talk ourselves right out of it. We don't pay attention to those triggers. So what happens is they don't go away.
Hmm.
They just become more and more intense. And then ultimately what happens is you either get burnt out or you wind up building up resentment. So if it's towards a particular person that continues to do it, then you build up resentment. Or
Right.
you might wind up avoiding interactions with that person. So I'm almost certain, I could bet that you have a client or two, or potential client or two, where you're like, yeah, not gonna answer that phone. Ain't
That's
gonna do
it.
it. Right or wrong.
Right. You're
And what
right.
is the issue? Why is it that you're avoiding talking to them?
Because I don't want to be bothered. Like, cause I already know what's up. I already know how it's gonna go down. So I rather divert and deal with you in a different way than how you gonna deal with me. Cause
Mhm.
I don't have time. Like I don't want to deal
So
with
give me
you.
an example. Give me an example of something that you don't have time for that they do, that you're like, yep, nope.
So the repeat phone calls saying the same thing over and over again, like that
Mm.
I just don't process that well.
Mhm.
And it bothers me because I can easily send you an email, I can outline it. And it's like I want to be able to serve and I want to be able to, help the best I can. But like
Mhm.
if you're not intentionally listening to me the first time and you're trying
Mhm.
to problem solve yourself or figure something out yourself, and then you're asking me for help, then you calling me like 5 times about one thing, like that it's like, what do you want me to do? If you're not gonna listen to what I have to say, then what do you want me to do? And I think that is my biggest problem is that, people ask for help, but then they don't wanna receive the help, and then they keep coming to you because it's like, "But my problem's not resolved, but you
Mhm.
didn't listen to me either." So
Mhm.
we're stuck in a rock and a hard place right now.
Mhm. 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 So I heard you mention several things in that, because you have a thing with repeating yourself. Sounds like
Mhm.
you have a thing with someone you telling someone to do something and they don't do it or they do the opposite. So feeling like your time has been wasted.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. And also it sounds like you want to communicate in a particular way. However, you're being forced to communicate in a way that is not conducive for you. Would that be fair to
Mhm.
say?
That's fair.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
Uh-huh. So, let me see. Where can I go? Because there's a lot to unpack with that. Okay, so I think what because and this is not uncommon, right? And I love that we're kind of just doing like we didn't talk about this ahead of time or anything, like just kind of
No,
organically
yeah, I
flew
didn't
into
know I was
that.
gonna be a subject of your life coaching.
Might as well. You said you needed the help, so here you go, free session. Don't ever say I didn't do anything for you, okay? Uh, So this makes me think about something called the law of responsibility, right? So we have myths
Mhm.
in regards to boundaries, but then we also have laws, also known as legitimate rights. So hey, Gina's like, yes, all of that for me. Y'all come on in here. I'm telling you, I'm giving out free help right now. Tell the people. So, the law of responsibility talks about our responsibility to people versus our responsibilities for people, right? So Gina said she just joined, didn't even know the topic, but that helps. See, come on in. I'm
Come
telling
on
you.
in the room.
I'm trying to tell you. Okay. So we have responsibilities to people, we have responsibilities for people. So our
Mhm.
responsibility for people, if you will, the only person that we are responsible for is ourselves. That's it. We are the only person that we can control. We are the only person that we are responsible for. But we are responsible to people when they cannot help themselves. Okay. So
Mhm.
I'm responsible for myself, and then I'm responsible to other people if they cannot help themselves. So when I say if they cannot help themselves, they're, I mean, like in real life, they cannot help themselves. Not that they're choosing not to help themselves. That's different, right?
Mhm.
So, but we do have responsibility to ourselves as well.
Right.
So what happens in the situation that you were just talking about is your responsibility for yourself and to yourself is for you to protect yourself and to make sure that you are honoring yourself so that you can take care of yourself, hence self-care, right? But
Right.
what you do is you say, okay, I'm going to push myself to the side, and then you pick up somebody else's responsibility and then you hold that for them. So instead of them figuring out how to troubleshoot, blah, 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 whatever it is that you've already told them 50, 11 times, you put yourself in a position where you have to continue to do that for them. Your responsibility to them, because they didn't know, right? You're the tech guru. Yes.
Mhm.
So your responsibility to them is, hey, this is how, what's an example of something you might help one of your clients with?
So, installing SSL certificates. So, like security protocols in the back end.
Okay, perfect. So there, I don't know what that is, but cool, cool. So there you that's why you do that and I do this. So you are teaching them how to install SSL certificates. I'm assuming this comes with kind of like a hands-on type situation, possibly some written instructions or an actual demonstration. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
And your
Yes.
expectation after that time is that using what we just did, you should be good to go. Yes?
Correct.
Okay. So I shouldn't have to do 5 consultations with you about installing SSL certificates because my responsibility to you, I gave you everything that you needed. Yes?
Correct.
Okay.
You got it.
So then if I, Kimberly, come back after that, you've already given me everything I needed for the SSL certificates. And now I come back and I'm like, hey, I lost the whatever. I can't find the email. I blah, 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 whatever excuse that I come up with. Your responsibility to me has ended because you gave me what I needed. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. But because I was irresponsible, now I ain't got it. So
And
instead
I
of me,
think
oh, go ahead.
so, and that's the and I'm gonna be very transparent here, and that's
Mhm,
the quagmire for me. And that's the issue that I have for me personally, because I know that people genuinely don't know. And in the industry that I'm in, like, a lot of people don't know like what's taking place on the back end.
mhm,
So they're literally trusting you to guide them in that process. And
mhm,
so the boundary issue is like, I want to be with you every step of the way, but I can't drag it for you. I can't do it for you unless you pay for that expertise to do that for you.
mhm,
So it's like a rock and a hard place, because
mhm.
like in business, people be quick to rate you a 1 star
Right.
because you not going above and beyond
Mhm,
that expectation that you were just
mhm,
talking about. So although
mhm,
I don't have a duty technically,
mhm,
that person could go on Google review and hit me with a 1 star
mhm,
because I didn't extend myself to share this information again, although
mhm.
it's their responsibility.
Uh-huh.
But how does that look for me? And so that's the quagmire that I have.
Yeah, and I totally understand that because those of you like Gina, Catalina, they're educators, right? Gretchen, educators. You all are in education, and we totally think about this, even though we don't have Google reviews, right? But we got to keep our customers happy. Our kids, our parents, these stakeholders, right? So I absolutely get it. And me, even being a life coach, like people could go on and be like, she trash, she out here, she won't help me, my life falling apart, blah, 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 what have you, right? So I totally get it. This is real. So then my question would be, what boundaries can you set up on the front end that already give the expectation that take into account what happens when, because you know it's going to happen, it's happened time and time again.
Mhm.
So what happens when, how do you go about getting that? And then how are you going to respond when that happens?
So solution oriented moving forward, I have started to identify some of the most common questions and generate a FAQ, to where then it's video reviews. That is one link that people
Hmm.
can start to have like a knowledge based on their own. And if they're unable to get it, I have already provided it. So therefore, if you want us to do it for you, then you would just need to pay a premium fee of our time to do so.
There you go. Right. But because you paid attention to how this situation made you feel. So you paid attention to those physical triggers. Those
Mhm.
physical triggers told you something is not jiving right now. Like, I don't like how this is making me feel. Therefore,
Mhm.
I see this as a boundary that I need to put into place. And I need to think about how I'm going to communicate that boundary on the front end so I don't ever have to feel this way again.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's the process. Like, that's literally what it's like when we're talking about boundaries. And this can look so many different ways, right? Because we have boundary issues when it comes to friends, when it comes to family. Like, we're talking in the context of business. But this is applicable in all areas of life, even with
Mhm.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the process of actually communicating those boundaries. Well, and also the types of boundaries that there are. So there are two main types of boundaries. So we have physical boundaries and we have emotional and intellectual boundaries. So you can put that back up.
Okay.
So when we are talking about having good boundaries in place, there are certain things, certain ways that that might be communicated and I'm saying good, I'm going to say healthy, I'm going to use the actual terminology. So when we have healthy boundaries versus unhealthy boundaries, there are certain ways that we communicate things. There are certain what how do I want to say systems, if you will, that we have in place for letting us know that we have healthy boundaries. So I'll just talk about a few of these here. So one, this is a big one. We'll just start out with the biggest one. A healthy boundary says being comfortable saying no. I want to let you all know, in case you didn't know, that no, the word no, those two letters N and O, is a complete sentence. Put a period after that. No, right? Being comfortable saying no, as opposed to saying yes to things you don't want to do. Now, we experience this type of thing all the time when we are dealing with people in our lives that we love, especially family and friends. They ask us to do something, we don't want to do it. However, we say yes because we're trying to be nice, we don't want to hurt their feelings, blah, blah, blah. All of that is rooted in fear. We're afraid the relationship is going to change some type of way if we say no. So instead, we say yes, right? So being comfortable saying no is one of the absolute tenets of having healthy boundaries. In the book, I told y'all about the whole thing is when to say yes and how to say no, because people don't know how to say no, right? So, absolutely knowing when to say no and how to say no, and that it
Mm.
is okay to say no if whatever you're saying yes to makes you feel some type of way. So again, we have to go back to thinking about how um it makes us feel. If you start to get those triggers, your stomach starts to hurt, you start getting agitated, you start sweating, you find yourself wanting to avoid the person, right? That is a clear indication that you are having a boundary issue and you said yes to something that you should have said no to. So
Mhm.
Danielle, I see you dropping in the comments. Let me know what your thinking is behind that because I would love to explore that. So I said there are two types of boundaries. So there's physical boundaries and then there are emotional intellectual boundaries. So when we think about physical boundaries actually have to do with our physical space. Give you an example. I was in Publix yesterday, right? Now, in this coronavirus,
Oh
they
boy.
have turned the aisles one directional, right? There are arrows on the ground. They have signs on the end caps that are saying wrong way, do not enter, right? They got signs everywhere saying maintain 6 feet distance, like all it. Yo, why people coming both ways up this aisle, bro?
Yeah.
Yo, why am I sitting here trying to pick out a loaf of bread? Dude comes from the opposite direction. I turn around and you up on my bag.
Jesus.
Physical boundary issue. And the look that I gave, oh boy, let him know he needed to back it on up. Like you done tried my life, sir. Back up, right? But that was a physical boundary for me. Other physical boundaries might be somebody touching your hair. Right,
Mhm.
that's big for us as Black people. Oh, is that your hair? Oh my God, can I touch it? No, you cannot.
Thank you.
Um, Having people take affection is one that I had to teach my students. People, you are not entitled to give somebody a hug or give someone a kiss. You need to ask for that. That is their body. They're in control of their body, and they just might say no. The answer might be no.
Right.
Right. But we train our kids, for instance, go over and go hug Auntie Lulu. Give her a hug and kiss. Well, maybe they don't want to give her a hug and kiss. And that is
Yep.
okay. So we've been brought up to ignore, again, those physical responses that we've had because all of us can think about somebody that we've had to hug or had to be in close physical proximity with. And we was like, yeah, I ain't with this. Like, I do
Mhm.
not want to do this right now. But feeling that the social pressures or whatever had you in a place where you had to do it.
Yep.
So we have to give ourselves license to be able to say no to that, right? So physical boundary. Emotional intellectual boundaries are things that have to do with our mind or our emotions. So this could be something like somebody promising you that they're going to do something, they keep breaking their promises.
Mhm.
Somebody insulting you or throwing shade every opportunity that they get, and really what we call making you feel some type of way. But it's not making you feel some type of way necessarily physically, it's about what's happening on the inside. So your
Mhm.
emotions are being triggered, or something in your mind is like danger, don't even go around that person. Um, and we usually see that with avoidance, right? So Danielle, if we could highlight her comment, she says, when I said something about fear, that what I said is the reason that we don't say no to things is because we are afraid that the relationship is going to change. And that's rooted in fear. That's the reason why we don't say no. So I don't say no to giving you a hug because I fear you might cuss me out and I don't feel like being called the B word today. So I'm going to just go ahead and give you the hug. Or I don't want you to say that I'm acting funny. Or I don't want
Mhm.
to have my job in danger if I don't accept this extra work that I know is not my responsibility. So I'm going to just go ahead and do it because I know that you hold this position of power over me. So I'm going to just say yes, even though everything in me is screaming, no, I cannot do this right now. But I'm saying yes because I'm afraid. So it's rooted in fear. And we know
Yeah.
that God has not given us a spirit of fear, right? And so when we identify that, we really have to deal with that and go back to the root of fear and eradicate that fear so that we are able to truly advocate for ourselves, to say yes to the things that are serving us and no to the things that are not.
Yeah.
What you thinking over there?
So you are preaching to me, and I didn't know that this episode was going to be talking about me and
I ain't
dealing with
either.
my own boundaries. So it's even, it's a really great conversation. And that's why I even love having podcast episodes with you, because every time that we talk, you expand my mindset more and more. That people need to go hire Kimberly Jackson. She's the truth, y'all. Y'all, I'm telling you.
I just be trying to do a little something for the people, you know what I mean? So, okay, so throw that graphic back up with the healthy boundaries versus the unhealthy boundaries because I want to highlight another one. Okay, so along with that saying no, a healthy boundary is feeling safe and valid when you express your emotions versus stuffing your feelings in order to keep the peace. So, this is something else that we wind up doing because, again, rooted in fear. If I say how I really feel, then this relationship might change. So, I'm just going to stuff what I feel because I'm afraid that you might say something to me that's going to hurt my feelings. I'm afraid of the truth. It could be any of those things, right? Another one, knowing that your happiness, this is a big one, knowing that your happiness is your responsibility versus expecting someone else to make you happy. So let's pause there for a moment. So Will Smith and Jada Smith, right? They have the red Jada has the Red Table Talk. And one time on there, they were talking about their marriage, and Jada was talking about how she was, they were at a point where they were having some type of conflict or something or whatever. And Will was not sure what to do. And the both of them said something to the effect of, I had to allow the other person to find their happiness and stop trying to control them so that they could be happy because I can't give you happiness. So, what happens when we look for other people to make us happy is we give our power away. And that
Mm,
person is a person. They are going to fail you. It is going to happen. They're going to fail you. They're going to disappoint you. But if we don't understand that, we're placing unrealistic expectations on somebody else
mhm.
to help us to be happy or to be the sole source of our happiness. And it's not fair because
Yeah.
they can't do it. Because again, if we go all the way back to our responsibilities, the only person that they're responsible for is themselves. They're not responsible for you.
Right.
So when you find yourself in a place of unhappiness and you're trying to pull that from other people, that's because there's a void in you, not in the other person.
Mm. You better preach it.
So, what happens with this, and again, the reason we're talking about this on the whole child is because these are things that we put into our kids, and we don't realize that we are indoctrinating them with unhealthy practices at such an early age. So, what happens is they grow up without these boundaries intact, and then they wind up in situations and they have no idea how they got in a situation, how to get out the situation, but it's because we continue to perpetuate this cycle because we ain't got good boundaries. So because we
Mhm.
don't have good boundaries, then our kids don't have good boundaries, and it just continues. continues, right? So we think about our kids for a moment. Bianca, this is your wheelhouse right here. What have you said is the drug that they are seeking right now?
So right now it's validation on social media.
Clout and validation, right? So they're doing all of these things to try to get themselves to a place of feeling worthy. And they're doing that because they are missing the piece of self worth and self esteem that hasn't been put into them. But what happened is they've watched their parents, the generation before them, find validation in their relationships, find validation in work, find validation in their size, in their weight, and on Instagram. Like they've watched this happen. So they just picked it up. Oh, that must be how I feel good about myself. If I have a lot of followers, if I have a lot of likes, if people interact with me in this particular way. And it's
Yeah.
because we've taught them that. And it's not
Yeah.
our fault either because our parents taught it to us, but somebody got to break the cycle. Okay.
Somebody. I
Somebody.
was talking to some young queens, and they were telling me that they delete a picture if it doesn't get a certain amount of
Yes.
likes because they feel ugly if they don't
Hmm.
get enough likes. And I'm like, what?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
like that's the mindset that like if you don't have all these likes and it's different from another picture, just exclude the algorithm and how it does what it wants. But
Hmm.
if I don't have a certain number of likes, that picture is ugly and I'm going to take it down.
Yes. And that's how I've always wondered prior to understanding that when talking to them. I've always wondered how they can have thousands and thousands and thousands of followers with like three pictures. But that's what happens. They put them up and then they delete them. Oh, that one didn't perform so well. Let's get rid of that. And so like why did you post it? Because you're looking for that validation. They're looking for something in someone else, and that is a clear indication of a boundary issue. Yeah, Danielle, I would absolutely encourage you. She says she wants to ask her niece about that. She's 15. she'll tell
Absolutely.
she will tell you if she doesn't do it, her friends do. Like
Mhm.
that is a real thing that they do. And it again, it's because that self-worth piece isn't there. There's a void that's there. So they don't know how to identify that void. So they're just doing what they've been taught. Right. So that unhealthy boundary of I'm looking for other people to make me happy because I don't know what makes me happy. Do you know how hard, if you ask, this is another challenge for y'all. If you ask your kids, what are they proud of themselves? Like, what is your biggest accomplishment? What are you proud of? What are the things that make you happy? It is so tough for them to come up with those things because they're so used to looking out. Now, what they can tell you is what they don't like. If you ask them to make a list of the things that they don't like about themselves, oh, that mug is a mile long. But
Uh-huh.
in regards to that self fulfillment, it's not there. It's
Yeah.
not there because they haven't been given the skill set to really be able to understand how they were made, understand why they were made, understand that they were created perfectly. Like they don't get all of that because again, they've watched, oh, this is how you get validated through other people. And if other people don't validate me, then I must be trash. Cool. And that's how they live their lives, right? So all of that goes into this topic about boundaries. Let me grab one more and then we're going to talk about how you communicate these boundaries. So again, healthy boundaries versus unhealthy boundaries. So let's see. Let's go with being comfortable disagreeing is a healthy boundary versus being afraid to disagree. Now, in this one, this is fear is built right into it. And I think maybe I don't know if that was like I see Gina had said something earlier about remembering to she remembered that there was a time that she was fearful at work. Um and I'm so proud of her. Gina, Gina and I used to work together in Hillsborough County, but that she now that she has kids, she's decided to break that cycle of fear. Um, it is okay for people not to agree with you and for you to not agree with other people. That is okay. Everybody is not going to agree on everything. Like, it is okay. So, what you have to do is acknowledge what you're feeling. You state your piece. But again, remember your responsibility to inform people. You are not responsible for how that person receives your disagreement. The fact of the matter is that you're honoring you in that. And then if they decide that they agree or disagree, that is them. That is solely exclusive from you. So Danielle said she's working on that because tension, she doesn't like tension. Some people can't disagree without getting loud, disrespectful, and the like. So glad you brought that up, Danielle, because that's where we're about to go. So let's talk about how we communicate these boundaries, right? Because that's a real thing, right? I don't like
Mhm.
conflict. I'm not trying to like you be doing the most, da da da, whatever, whatever, right? So let's say we are going to have a conversation with someone that we disagree with. Let's just use that as an example since we're on that. You're going to have a conversation with someone that you disagree with. You know that they have the tendency to get loud and disrespectful and do the most, and you're not really with that today, right? But
Right.
you working on your boundaries and you trying to honor your feelings and your physical triggers, right? So you know that this is something that you have to address, but you already know in times past this has gone way left, and that's not what you're trying to do today. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to determine what you want this to look like. So just like we did earlier, Bianca, I'm like, okay, so you got these clients, right? They out here. What
Mhm.
what is something a solution that you can put in on the front end before you even go into this so you don't have to feel that way again. So if I am about to have a conversation with someone and I know that we're not going to disagree, I'm gonna put some norms into place. So I'm
Yeah.
going to say something to the effect of, I want us to have this conversation. I realize that there's a possibility that we may not see eye to eye. What I'm going to ask is that you hear me out, and I'm going to do the same. I'm also going to ask that you keep your volume at a level 2. That's partner talk, right? For those who do champs, um, keep your volume at a level 2. Right. And if you feel that you are being triggered, if you feel that you're getting upset, and the same for me, we're going to agree to walk away before becoming disrespectful. I'm going to
Mm.
ask that you don't curse as you are talking to me if that's something that's important to you. I'm going to ask that we don't call names as we are having this conversation, right? So on the front end, you already put it out there. This is what we need to have in this space, and it shouldn't all come from you, right? It needs to come from them as well. So what are
Yeah.
you going to ask of me? They might ask, well, please don't roll your eyes because that's a trigger for me. Let's make sure we maintain eye contact. Let's make sure that we stay seated, right? Because all of these are things that could cause something to escalate. But before we even enter into this conversation, we're gonna speak clearly about what it is that we need. When you're
Mhm.
saying that, when you're setting those boundaries and setting those norms, you want to use as few words as possible, because what happens is sometimes we try to justify why we're setting the boundary, which
Yeah.
which devalues what you're saying, but it can also be a trigger for the other person. So what you don't want to do is be like, so I'm gonna ask that you don't curse at me because you always be cussing and stuff, and then you get loud, and then I ain't got time for that, and that just made me feel some type of way. And now we got a whole because you projecting and you generalizing and you just doing the most, right? So
Right.
speaking clearly, firmly, right? Saying what you mean and meaning what you're saying, but using as few words as possible. This is what I need, period. What do you need? Cool. Can we agree?
Mm.
Make sense? So
Yes.
then from there, like I said, you're going to avoid justifying your position, right? So what you feel is what you feel. You don't have to have a reason, if you will, for why you feel what you feel. This is what I feel. This is how this makes me feel. Can we agree to this? And then not apologizing for setting the boundary. So this is the other thing that people do is because you're fearful, you try to temper that with a well, I'm sorry, but like, and that's something else we do is we'll say something like, well, if you can kind of like not curse because, I mean, I'm sorry, but that makes me feel some type of way like when you do that because like I don't really like it. And so what you're doing is you're being real wishy-washy. Say
Yeah,
say what you mean what you say. And be
that's
okay with
it.
that. And understand they might not agree, they might disagree, and that's okay. They gotta own that, and you have to own that. So if we about to have this conversation and we're not ready to receive the conversation, both of us, guess what? It's not time to have that conversation. So
Thank
then a
you.
boundary might be we're not going to be able to coincide or have an additional conversation until we deal with this. That might be a boundary for you. And you can feel however you want to feel about it. But that's what I need. Until we deal with this elephant in the room, I'm not going to be able to have, hey, how was work? Blah, 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 small talk, blah, 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 when I know that we have an issue that we need to deal with. So a boundary I would set is until we can finally get together and talk about this, I'm not going to be able to talk to you. And yeah.
I really love that because I think that sometimes we often overcompensate because either we feel like we need to explain ourselves or we feel like we have to give justification and reasons, but it doesn't even require all of that. I mean, it is what it is. And I really like the fact of, hey, before we have this
Mhm,
conversation, let's go over some ground rules and let these be mutually beneficial rules
mhm.
so that we can move forward. And if you're unable to receive that, then this is not the time that we, broach this right now. We can regroup at a time that it meets us mutually.
Mhm.
But that's important.
Yeah.
That's impactful for sure.
And it's often overlooked. Like we find ourselves in the middle of the situation, then we like, oh snap, it done hit the fan. Now I gotta
Mhm.
moonwalk out of this or figure out how I'm gonna salvage this relationship
But not
instead
moonwalk
of
though.
yes, we moonwalk out. Instead of prioritizing the relationship and prioritizing one's feelings before even entering into the situation. Because again, your body and your mind has already told you how you feel. I continue to go back to these physical responses that we have to when we are being triggered. You all have to
Mhm.
go back and listen to our last podcast when we were talking about creating the self-care plans because we talk about that. That's your indicator that a boundary has been crossed. That's your indicator.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
as soon as you know that, it's like, okay, what do I need in order to not feel this way again? What do I need to feel like I'm honoring what I feel, and I'm honoring myself? Right. And I again feel for some reason led to go back to setting boundaries is not selfish. Setting boundaries is something that we do in order to make sure that we are keeping ourselves at peace and that we are keeping ourselves safe. The people that tell you that setting boundaries are selfish are people that don't have boundaries. That's why. So when we think about boundaries, for instance, let's think about it like your front door to your house, right? So I'm willing to bet that your front door is locked right now, right?
It is.
Why?
Because I don't want anyone to just come up in this house.
Oh, so boundaries is just like locking your front door. Now you have the ability if somebody knocks on the door, what can you do?
I can decide to open the door to entertain, or I could look at to see who's at the door and decide not to and walk away.
Exactly. There are many times. So when I lived in my house prior to where I live now, I had a garage, right? So nobody knew if I was home. There was so many times people would knock on the door and I would look out that people and be like, "Pfft, child, I ain't even expecting company. Sometimes I wouldn't even get up because I'm not entertaining company today. Okay. So your boundaries are like that. You have the ability to unlock and open the door, but you don't have to. Just because somebody knocking on the door don't mean you got to open it.
You're right.
And furthermore, just because you unlocked and opened the door does not mean that they are allowed inside your house.
Mm,
Right? So they might just have to
that's
stand
it.
there at the threshold. But there are some people who are safe that you would prior to COVID, because can't nobody come in now. But there
Right.
are some people who you would allow into your house. But then I'm gonna say, just because you allow somebody in your house doesn't mean that you would allow them into your bedroom.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? That's how
Yeah.
boundaries work. You determine how much access you give somebody to your heart and to your spirit, because into your mind. So at the end of the day, this is all about protecting you and helping you to maintain your peace. Just because somebody shows up don't mean you have to open it. If you choose to open it, doesn't mean you have to invite them in. If you choose to invite them in, doesn't mean that you have to let them into the inner spaces of you.
Mm-hmm.
So Gina said, and it doesn't mean you can't ask them to leave. Very true. But the goal is to use your spirit of discernment in this and pay attention again to those triggers, right? So these triggers that I keep talking about, like those of you who are connected to your spirit, that's the Holy Spirit, like giving you cues and clues, like something ain't right, don't do this, don't do that,
Right.
don't interact, right? But again, we're so used to downplaying that. The goal is to not put yourself in a position where you have to ask somebody to leave your house,
Mm.
your life, your mind, your whatever. So we have to be, that's why boundaries are important, to have that in place so that the people that you do let into your inner space are people that deserve to be there. Now,
Amen.
in the event that something does happen and you have to ask them to leave, that's where we go back to setting these boundaries and being firm with what you're saying. So if someone has violated your spirit and violated your peace, you can't confront that like, well, you kind of made me feel some type of way, like, because I ain't really, like that a lot or whatever. So, next time if you could like not do that, because it's kind of like you're asking them. You're not really asking them, you're telling them that wasn't okay. Please don't do that to me again.
Yeah.
Period. Not question mark. I'm not, because I'm responsible for me, right? So my responsibility for me and to me is for me to state what's going to serve me and what is not going to serve me. I have control over that. You don't have control over that. So if we get to a place where I have to kick you out of my life, then I have to be direct about that. Because otherwise, people be squatting in your life. You know anybody like that squat in your life, and you be like, "Why are you still here in my life? Leave me alone."
Yeah.
And that's because we haven't been direct.
I'm just-
Would you say?
and that's what I was gonna say is about how we have just kind of like been like kind of weaving in and out. We haven't been direct, we haven't been intentional, and then all of a sudden when we try to make boundaries, we still not intentional with our boundaries, and then you want everything to be cut and dry, but you weren't cut and dry with the boundary.
Correct. Correct. And it becomes messy when it doesn't have to be, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm going to say is, anybody who is offended by you setting up a boundary in order to maintain your peace and that relationship changes is not a relationship that was serving you in the first place. Because if I love you and I care about you, and you say to me, Kimberlyn, when you rolled your eyes and when you did whatever, that hurt me and I'm not okay with that. And I'm still like, girl, whatever, rolls eyes, sucks teeth, continues to do it. You don't care about me.
Right.
Right. And that's sometimes a hard pill. Again, we go back to fear. So that's sometimes a hard pill for us to swallow because we've placed so much in that relationship that we're fearful of losing that relationship because that was something that gave us happiness instead of us finding it in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when we really get committed to this self-care journey, and when we really get committed to making sure that we are honoring having things and people in our lives that honor us and are going to bring us peace, there are some relationships that are going to fall away.
Yeah.
And this is something that we have to teach our kids, y'all. Like, they don't, when the people they call friends, boo, that's not your friend. Like, that is not your friend. That is not your friend. So I always would say, friend is a word I do not play with, like, at all. Everybody is not considered my friend at all. I don't use that word lightly, because me calling you a friend means that we've had to go through some things. You've had to really show that you care about me as much as I care about you. Our kids don't have a high threshold for that. They just call anybody their friend. So then these people do
Mhm.
things to them on social media. They talk about them. They're bullying them. They pass their pictures around like they're doing all this stuff. And because, one, they were looking for validation in that person, they put themselves in that position in the first place. But then secondly, they wind up chasing these relationships that don't serve them, because we haven't taught them how to find happiness in self and how to have particular boundaries. If a boy asks a girl for a naked picture, she doesn't have enough agency to say no. No, because if you don't like me for me and you need me to send you a picture for you to like me, I'm straight, I'm good. But she would have to be confident in herself to be able to do that. Because guess what? Everybody else doing it.
Yep. And I go back to this Teen Vogue. I'm saying it publicly. Teen
I
Vogue
forgot
in
about
a
that.
March episode was complicit in giving sexting tips to teens. It was posted all over, the receipts on there. Go look up Teen Vogue and sexting. The article was giving sexting tips to teens. Like this is what's taking place in 2020. So yeah, parents check the cell phone because it's
And
dangerous out here.
grooming them. So that's, and you've used this word, and I know very intentionally, grooming them
Yes.
for this type of life. And that is not what we want to be promoting. That's not.
Yeah.
And it's just so sad, that culture. So this is not something like, y'all, everybody ain't walking around talking about, oh, get you some boundaries, get you some boundaries. You know why? Because that's going to cause so many of us to eradicate those things that don't serve us. So subscriptions to magazines change, people that are in your life change, people that you're following on social media change. Like, all of that is going to change, and people want to keep you comfortable. Stay right here, don't rock the boat. So they're not going to
Good.
empower you to get this information to really make sure that you are honoring your best self. They're talking about living your best life, but in their context, not in the one that's actually going to serve you. So it's just, I can't overstate the importance of really understanding this work, and really and it's work, y'all. I'm not, so let me say this. You are not about to blink your eyes and snap your fingers and have stellar boundaries tomorrow. Like, it ain't about to
Mhm.
happen. It is a process that you have to go through, and it's something that's continuous. So I would say, start with one thing first, one relationship, one whatever. How do you know which one it is? Go back to those physical responses. The moment that something makes you feel some type of way, in air quotations, that's a place to start,
Yeah.
no matter how big or how small it is. Because the more digging that you do, the more that you are going to get to the root cause of what it is. It could be something as simple as, you went to the bathroom and your spouse left the toilet seat up. And
Yeah.
in your mind, you like, if that fool leave this toilet seat up one more time, I'm a snap, right? Why does that bother you? Start there. Start there. Right? It might be, well, you know that I might fall into the toilet, and I got a thing with bathroom. I have a thing with bathrooms. So I got a thing with bathrooms, and you know that, I've asked you to do this. I feel like you aren't regarding what is important to me. That's a conversation that can be had. Whatever it is, no matter how small, start there, and you develop the muscles to really be able to execute these boundaries
Yeah.
flawlessly.
Wow. Mind blown today. More awareness of boundaries. That this is great.
Thanks for coming to our podcast.
I'm gonna post the link to the in exploitation because I don't think a lot of people really knew what was taking place because it was kind of moved under the rug.
Hmm.
But since we got y'all's attention, I might as well go ahead and show you really quick. And you can view this link yourself. But the National Center of Sexual Exploitation actually made a press
Yep.
release March 25th, 2020, which was less than a month ago, about how Teen Vogue must stop encouraging quarantine teens to self-producing child exploitation material by sexting. And then they added that they have tips that they put on Snapchat and different things for children. This is what was advertised to children. So it's something to really be intentional with, because our kids are seeing this and they're doing it, and because we're quarantined, there's more of the need for
Yes.
that, conversation, more of the need for that. And so I really hope that people take the opportunity to really be intentional with their children. And the whole point of this is like talking about self-awareness of yourself is to make you a better person for the humans that you have in your
Yes.
house, the little
Yes.
humans that are looking up to you. So if you're able to get your baggage and get your trauma and get your stuff together, then you're more aligned to help your children so that they don't replicate the behaviors and the patterns that they see at home.
Right.
And that's just what this is all about. I just pray for our children really, because these apps and all of that, the kids are on, the new app that's going viral right now is House Party. Everybody's
Hmm.
going to people's house parties and you don't know what they doing. The kids, they have some people DJing, smoking weed, and all of this is on the app House Party. So
Hmm.
parents, just be intentional with this and have boundaries, have social media boundaries.
Yeah. And they're not gonna like it, right? So I already know that. Like they're gonna feel some type of way. But guess what? It is not your responsibility to worry about how they're going to react. When you know that you're operating under best intentions, you are helping them to make choices for themselves in the future that are going to serve them in a healthy manner.
Hmm.
And you got to be okay with that,
Yeah, you got to be
right?
all right with it.
Danielle says she's calling her niece tonight. Yes. And
Amen.
ask those tough questions. Ask the tough questions, but also make sure that it's safe for them to respond, right? So you can't, if you want transparency and you want to be able to have them talk to you, you can't flip your lid when they tell you what you're asking because they know the things, right? So it has to be a
Mhm.
safe culture. Again, putting those norms in place for them to be able to talk freely and then talking to them about the why. Like, gone are the days, y'all, where we just out here busting kids behinds and whipping them and all this kind of stuff with no understanding of why this is not okay. They don't understand. So because they don't understand, guess what? They're gonna do it again. Next time they're just gonna sneak and do it.
Right.
So have the conversation. And that conversation about sexting and all of that is a self-worth, self-esteem conversation.
Yep.
That's what that conversation is. That's not about you out here having sex with the boy. No, it's not an accusatory conversation. It's what are you proud of within yourself? What is it that makes you happy, right? Helping them to be able to develop those skills so that they don't go seeking this external happiness.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So this has been a very transformative episode. I did not know I was going to become one of Kimberly clients today, but it was a really good conversation about boundaries. And thank you guys for tuning into the podcast episode live. Oh Lord, I can't talk today. Let me say that again so I can edit this.
Oh goodness.
Thank you for and this is great. The Whole Child is a great series. And definitely watch out for the great things that we're going to be doing. The Whole Child is really going to be taking over very soon, and I'm very thankful for my co-host Kimberly because we about to take over. She about to take over. Kimberly, how can people find you and get your services and all that good stuff?
Absolutely. So you all can find me at my website is kimberlynjackson.com, on Facebook at Kimberlyn Jackson, and on Instagram at Kimberlyn J. And you can message me on any of those platforms, and my business line is there as well. So like Bianca said, I am a life coach. I do this in real life. And one of the things that, when Gina mentioned earlier that she remembers me talking about some of this in a coaching session, um, she is one of my former clients. Like, I am going to keep it real, and I'm going to tell you what is true, so that you can break whatever barriers that are holding you down. That is my whole thing about helping people to discover their destiny, to operate in purpose, to truly rid yourself of the things that are preventing you from being where it is that you were designed to be. So just know, this is me in my norm setting. Just know that I'm going to keep it real with you 100%. But it is all done in love, because I really just want everybody to win. So, yeah, holla at me if you feel it.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to Teaching for the Culture. And until next time, y'all, see y'all next in 2 weeks. See you in
2
2
weeks.
weeks.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.